we're learning more and more about this sort of by the hour, but that looks increasingly what it was like. And I think Trump's kind of refusal to have anything to do with Machado, the opposition leader who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and we're learning it was the fact that she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, and rather than telling them that Donald Trump should have had it.
Joining us this evening to offer their opinions on some of these biggest stories of the day, it's the historian and podcast host of Where Politics Meets History, Tessa Dunlop. Good evening, Tessa.
Evening.
And a happy new year to you. And ditto Gerry Baker, the Times columnist and editor-in-chief of the Wall Street Journal. Hi, Gerry.
Hello, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Lovely to have you both with us. Look, today we know that the deposed leader of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, appeared in court in New York today on drug and weapon charges. That is after the US captured the president and his wife over the weekend. Donald Trump has made no secret that he intends for US oil companies to rebuild and profit from the large reserves in Venezuela. As world leaders react to the news, the Labour MP John Trickett told our programme that the British public would want the UK to stand up to the US. He says they've broken international law.
It's quite possible to be struggling even with poverty, but also to have a larger vision of justice in the world and a world without violence. Because to tell you what people are saying to me is they think that the world may be on the tip of entering into some sort of ferocious war, and they don't want their children or grandchildren or themselves as younger men and women being conscripted into an army sent to war at the behest of Washington. And so I think we have a proud, I'm a patriot, most people are patriots, but they want Britain to stand up for what it believes in.
Dr. Donald Jensen joined us too, former diplomat at the US Embassy in Moscow and a professor at the Johns Hopkins University. He said President Putin and Russia will be obliged to retaliate.
This is a massive foreign policy disaster for Russia. Essentially, in the last year, not only Venezuela, but Syria and now possibly Iran, key Russian allies in the world, key Russian tools to push back against the West have all met disaster. This is on Putin. And this is a humiliation for himself and his leadership. This is a humiliation for Russia. And it's frankly something not mentioned much in the past few days. It's a massive setback for the oligarchs in the Kremlin.
That was Dr. Donald Jensen there. We'll perhaps talk about how far the reach on this extends in terms of the global order and global reaction in a few moments' time. But let's take this back to the here and now, Gerry Baker, if I can start with you. In upstate New York, reacting to what happened over the weekend. Was anyone surprised? And is anyone concerned about where this leaves Donald Trump, where this leaves Americans, if Donald Trump intervenes, albeit for correct reasons, in his view and many others, if he intervenes in other administrations, in other regimes?
Well, thanks. I think people are still puzzling. People who are paying attention to this, and I don't think it's, it got a lot of attention. Obviously, over the weekend, it was a dramatic action. I think a lot of Americans are very proud of their military and the extraordinary skill that they obviously showed in being able to pull this off. But I think there's so many unanswered questions, Kate, about first of all, about exactly how and why this came about, and kind of more importantly, what it means and what comes next, that I think people are withholding judgment. Look, it does look increasingly likely that this was a sort of a collaborative effort with Delcy Rodriguez, the vice president, who's now been sworn in as the not lawfully president, because not recognized. Maduro wasn't recognized as president either by the international community. But it does look increasingly as though, rather than this being a regime change by the United States, it's a leadership change, probably done in collaboration with elements of the Maduro regime that were already kind of falling out with him because of the utter disaster that Venezuela has been over the last 10 years or so. And I think in exchange for some sort of cooperation, much more cooperation actually with the United States, access to oil, a less confrontational relationship with the United States, perhaps most crucially, and I think this is one of the many elements we've got to learn about yet, perhaps some loosening of the relationship between Venezuela and Cuba, which I think is very much in the United States sights again. Then this was the deal that was done, that Delcy Rodriguez in some way helped probably the Americans Americans to pull this off. So it was kind of it was partly an inside job and partly a leadership change executed by the United States. We're learning more and more about this sort of by the hour, but that looks increasingly what it was like. And I think Trump's kind of refusal to have anything to do with Machado, the opposition leader who just won the Nobel Peace Prize, and we're learning it was the fact that she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize, and rather than telling them that Donald Trump should have had it, it may
was
have been
it though, really, Gerry? Because that is.
That is apparent. That has been seriously reported by the Washington Post and others. It wouldn't surprise me at all if it was
because she accepted the Nobel Peace Prize.
Yeah, but I think more seriously,
that was then an insult to Donald Trump.
It looks as though, she is a very charismatic figure who would have, represented would have represented regime change, but I don't think that was the appetite the United States had for the kind of chaos that may follow. The Maduro regime still has a lot of, has its hands on a lot of the levers of power. If they were to actually be forced out and and be replaced by a democratic government, I think that was not something the United States, the kind of turmoil that would represent, was something the United States was willing to do. So this looks increasingly like a kind of, as I say, a sort of an inside job executed with significant help by the United States that has basically just resulted in a change of leadership, and a leadership that is likely to be more friendly to the United States, going to give the United States the opportunities it wants. And again, with this big remaining question about Cuba, what happens next as far as Cuba's concerned, because Cuba has essentially been running the security apparatus in Venezuela for the last few years.
The Eurasia Group's annual top risks report out today, Tessa, says one of the leading risks is the United States itself unwinding its own global order. It's the US political revolution, ending global order. Do you believe that that's overblowing it, or is that what we're starting to see here?
I think it's redrawing it. Everyone keeps using this buzzword hinge. It's a hinge moment. Where it's much more sort of harking back to 19th century imperial power, me in my own backyard, me on my own lamppost. Certainly, I don't think Trump is even trying to blag this past the lawyers. He's not going to pretend that it comes anywhere near to being acceptable internationally. I mean, if he was trying to say Maduro is illegitimate, then he would surely replace him with the legitimate opposition. And for the aforementioned reasons, ridiculous though they may sound, he's not going to do that. So we can't say it's about getting rid of an illegitimate regime. Are you going to say that he's claiming he's a narco-terrorist? That's what he's on trial for, and therefore is a threat to the US. But if you go down that line of a narco-terrorist being a threat to the US and try and pass it through Article 51, that's a massive stretch. It's a huge extension of its use as a precedent for military action. And then finally, I suppose, you could argue it's a law enforcement operation to make the US safer. But then how does that sit with Trump now saying he's going to run the country and take all the oil? So this is Trump gaming the strongman theatre that he's a big part of. The worrying point, I think, is it's not just the message it sends out to the other big strong men in the world, it's whether they act on it. So by definition, if America gets bigger in Latin America, that will diminish China's significant inroads in that sphere. So quid pro quo, does that mean, unspoken China, you can do what you like, for example, with Taiwan? But if you really get into the nitty gritty of what that means, is America going to be cool with China running Taiwan and all their semiconductor and vital minerals that are essential for the tech bros in America? Are the Americans going to be cool with less access to the South China Sea, et cetera, et cetera? And we haven't even got onto Russia and Ukraine. So he's shaken the tree, Trump, but I don't think even he can tell you where the apples are going to land.
Yeah, I mean, Marco Rubio yesterday on the Sunday shows kind of repeatedly said the US is not at war with Venezuela, despite Donald Trump's comments about running Venezuela. Rubio stepped back from that as well. So you're right to your earlier point, Gerry, about whether this is just a helping hand in a change of leadership rather than a complete regime change. But then there's the introduction of US oil companies as well, which were exiled, of course, under the Maduro regime and the Chavez regime. Do they have an appetite to get back into Venezuela? I know that that stock market signals were good for them this morning, but they won't want to enter into a country currently with a very uncertain future.
The oil stuff is overblown. I've no doubt that Donald Trump thinks in a rather simplistic way, wow, Venezuela sits on top of 300 billion barrels of oil. That's the supposed estimate, although I think that's an estimate from the Chavez/Maduro regime rather than actually one that's been independently verified. That there are undoubtedly opportunities there for American oil companies. One American oil company is already there. There might be others that are looking at that, but it's not. There are two problems with the idea that America is going to suddenly gorge itself on Venezuelan oil. One is it's very difficult to extract this oil. This is not like the oil that sits up under the Saudi deserts. It's not like the oil that sits in shale deposits in the United States. It's deep, it's heavy, it's very difficult to get at. I've seen some reports today the estimated capital outlay that companies would have to make would be in the billions and billions of dollars. Would take a very, very long time before any of that comes on stream and would cost a lot of money to access it. So it might actually not even. Venezuela did used to produce about 4 million barrels of oil a day. It's down below 1 million now. Getting it back up to even 4 million barrels a day, which is still a bit of a drop in the bucket in the overall global picture, could require incredibly costly investments. I think that's not very likely. The second factor also is the oil price is actually falling, and it's falling down to a level that is making it increasingly costly and unprofitable for American companies to continue to produce oil here in the United States. The estimated break-even price of oil for shale companies in particular here in the United States is about $50 a barrel. Well, we're up around 56, 57. We're at 57 at the moment. It's come down, when this massive oil expansion here in the United States happened over the last decade, 15 years or so, the average oil price was in the 75, 80, up to 90, even $100 a barrel, which made the oil here accessible, at $50 a barrel, made it very, very profitable. If oil is coming down, if the oil price is coming down towards $50 a barrel, and any more production out of Venezuela will probably help that process a little bit. That's not really in the interest of. So I think the oil story is a little bit kind of overblown. And look, the other thing I'd say on the international law thing is. The United States has, look, I'm not denying in any way that Trump is a very different and revolutionary figure, but we should put into perspective, the United States has been knocking off leaders on questionable grounds from international law for at least 75 years. Mossadegh in Iran in 1953, Vietnamese leaders in the 1960s that tried to get rid of Fidel Castro repeatedly in the 1960s. It did get rid of Salvador Allende in Chile in 1973. It got rid of the Grenadian government in the 1980s. It got rid of Manuel Noriega in 1989, and in Panama, and it got rid of Saddam Hussein in 2003. There were serious questions about whether any of those was consistent with international law. So this isn't that new. The United States will do what it will remove leaders that it sees as not in its interest if it feels it can do so with relatively low cost. And I think this is one of the latest.
All right, Tessa.
I just have to quickly say I couldn't disagree more about the oil question being overblown. Trump has repudiated in all shapes the energy transition to green. Absolutely, this is a message particularly to China. Stay out of Latin America, not only because of the oil, also because of increasingly around metals, precious metals, but certainly oil is a big player, will become increasingly significant because at about 2030, 2032, when this oil could be made good, because it's going to take that long for the infrastructure to be up and running, that's when we're really going to see the energy needs of AI kick in. And the tech bros have only just rumbled in the last year as to how much energy their AI revolution is going to require. I say that oil, and Trump has said it, is front and center of this story.